All right, welcome to Just Make Art, a conversation about making art and the artist journey with myself, Nathan Terborg, and my good friend, Ty Nathan Clark. We're just two artists trying to navigate the art world, just like you. So mostly we're going to be talking about various quotes, what they mean, and how they apply to the artistic practice. Today, we're going to discuss a quote by Langston Hughes. And I'm really excited to talk about this one with you, Ty. Yeah. So the quote goes like this. This is from Thank You, Ma'am, which was a short story that Langston Hughes wrote. And it goes like this. I have discovered in life that there are ways of getting almost anywhere you want to go if you really want to go. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to unpack this and take our first pass.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And obviously we could unpack, the short story, Thank You, Ma'am, and, the meaning of, that dialogue within that story that, piggybacks on Langston Hughes' own story. For those of you that aren't familiar with Langston Hughes, you should be. He is one of the most famous American writers, poets, social activists, playwrights, columnists in the history of American literature. A Black American writer who should have a lot more recognition than he does. And one of the earliest innovators of jazz poetry, and most often known as one of the great leaders of the Harlem Renaissance. And I can guarantee you that somewhere within our episodes, we will end up talking about specific artists from the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s in Harlem, New York, because it should also get a lot more recognition than it does. Some beautiful artists that represented that time and space. But wow, what a quote. Taking that from a short story in literature and thinking about that in the terms of art and being a working artist and knowing that every artist out there, doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you are a beginning artist, an emerging artist, a mid-career artist, or an established artist, you have dreams, you have a vision of where you want your work to go. And so, this quote, this is a very powerful quote that came from a person at a time when the entire world or all of America was against him as a creator and as a human being, right? So you think of the roadblocks that a Langston Hughes had in Harlem in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, until he died far too young, the things he had to come up against just to get published, to create, to get his voice heard beyond just his community, which is where really it was initially only heard. You think about that as an artist, right? As a creator, we have roadblocks that we don't even know exist as artists, trying to get our work out there and trying to create. And so not to take anything away from Langston Hughes and his life at all, because we definitely are recognizing what he did, what he stood for, and the movement he was a part of during the Harlem Renaissance, and for Black artists today, what he represents. But let's shift this a little bit to just an average discussion of artists in general. When he says, I've discovered in life there are more ways of getting almost anywhere you want to go if you really want to get there. This is a conversation you and I have a lot, right?
That's accurate. Yeah. Yeah, I think, so just to not to bore people with the full backstory, but, as somebody who's definitely very, ambitious and achievement driven, goals are important to me, having a target to shoot for. And, being, still very early in my artistic practice, having a sense of, what a, low, medium, and high goal or objective, might be. I know where I ultimately want to go, but there's oftentimes, I think, in the artistic, the different twists and turns that the path might take. It's really difficult, for somebody who's early on to have a sense of, what's a reasonable sort of next step, right? So that's the context that you and I have discussed this sort of bigger idea, for just, for myself personally.
Yeah. I mean, man, artists come from every walk of life, right? So you have artists who've left career-driven worlds to paint, full time and to create art. You have artists who went to art school, left art school to find a job, because you can't afford to be an artist when you leave art school. You got to do something else to pay for that. You have artists that, go straight into an MFA because, man, that world out there is scary. And it seems like an MFA is the quickest way to get into galleries and to do things. And then there's a lot of artists with huge debt from their MFAs that realize, oops, that didn't really help me much. Then you have people who are just creating on a regular basis for years and years and years and hoping something happens. And the hard part is, the art world doesn't come with a set of instructions. There's no manual that says follow these steps. Like you could go buy a business book or you could go buy a whatever book and learn step by step by step to get to where you want to go. There's no rules. There's no set plan on how to get there. You kind of succeed, fail, succeed on your own. And you learn these lessons along the road of what the art world wants from you, what it doesn't want from you, what's acceptable, what doesn't. And
I think, what that makes me think of is just the, it's one thing to know where you want to go. It's also important. It's another thing to know, like, what are the checkpoints, to get there. And to your point, all of the different, micro adjustments and changes that are necessary along the way, to ultimately get to whatever the end goal, might be. Yeah. So in sort of unpacking that quote, there's ways of getting almost anywhere you want to go, right? So if we really dissect that, like, cool, not just there's a way, but there's ways, there's options, there's not a direct path, everyone, especially in something as, subjective and fickle as art, there's not going to be a one size fits all, paint by number, path to get from where you are to where you want to go. I think the part of this quote that really resonates with me and causes me to pause is, if you really want to go, like that last part. So, what I take from that is that there has to be some pretty strong, fuel in the tank, right? There has to be a desire. There has to be a passion. There has to be, something that's going to push and pull us through, the challenging times, the ups and downs that are inevitably, going to come, right? So I wonder if you could talk about, like, how to, I'm not even sure how to phrase this as a question, but I'm just thinking about, how do I know if I really want to go? What is really wanting to go? What is having that sort of fire? What does that even look like? And how does one then translate it, assuming that it's there, into the day-to-day, activities required to make the journey?
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't even really thought about that part until you just brought that up, because being a full-time artist or trying to be an artist in the art world is not for the faint of heart. Like, this is the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And I've done quite a few things. And this is the most difficult. And, when I left to go full time as a studio artist, I visited one of my former professors out in California, the sculptor, William Catling, and laid out all my work. We sat and talked, and he just said, I want to let you know, like, you're about to enter the most difficult point of your life. The most beautiful, joyful part, but also the most difficult. And now I know what he means. It is not easy, but I really wanted to go, right? It's how bad do you want it? Because you're going to struggle. You're going to suffer. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be confused. You're not going to have rules. You're going to fail, right? And you're going to be alone most of the time. Like, there's a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if your goal is to be a studio artist, I want to get into galleries. I want to impact the world with my art, or my community with my art, or my city, or my state, or my country, vice versa. I want to be in museums. I want a legacy with my art. All these questions that artists, should be having with themselves to figure out where they want to go. At the end of the day, you're going to be spending a whole lot of time alone in your studio by yourself. How bad do you want it? Because you're probably going to have to work a part-time job. You may have to work a full-time job. Because just because you're making a lot of art doesn't mean you're going to sell a lot of art right away, right? There's a grand myth of the art star, right? Because we know of the Basquiats, right? We know of these young painters that movies are made of that become celebrity in our eyes, but it's like there's so few of those. Those aren't lining the history of, art. There's a lot of 60, 70, 80-year-olds who finally made it in art after lots of years. And when I say make it, I don't mean wealthy. I mean supporting the practice, right? Paying rent, getting food, buying art supplies, none left at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Right. Yep. Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, there is an inverse relationship between how difficult the path to get someplace is and the amount of desire required, to make the journey, right? Especially a journey that is not, it's disorienting, right? You don't always even know where you are, on the map, so to speak, right? There is this could be a completely separate conversation entirely, but I'm going to bring it up now because I didn't connect these dots until we started talking here. Yeah. But there's a quote from Alice in Wonderland, and the Cheshire. I can never say Cheshire.
The Cheshire cat.
Yeah, that one. The cat. There's only one cat, I think, in that. So let's just go with that. But that cat says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And this is when, that's from Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. And that's, of course, when Alice was, asking for directions and didn't really know where she wanted to go, right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So it's almost in a way, the exact opposite, of this quote that we're discussing, today. But the takeaway from that quote for me is, it's really important to have an idea about where you want to go, with the understanding that it's not permanent. This is something that I had, thousands of conversations over the years in my previous life in the business world and talking about different goals and objectives with people. And I think that one of the sort of common misnomers about goals is that, especially long-term goals, is that once you pick a 5, 10, 20 year, like that's the goal, and that it can't change. And man, I can't think of a single goal that I've, set. Some I've hit, way more than that I've missed, but I can't think of a single one that was, longer than a day that didn't evolve and change, as time goes on. We're different people, today than we were, hopefully, last year, last month for that matter, so I think I'm a couple softballs here. Just the importance of knowing, of having a target, with the full understanding that it's not forever. It may be something, it probably will be something that changes as you go. The important thing is to have a destination. If you and I say, hey, we're going to go out, for lunch today, and we think, yeah, let's go get some Italian. Great. But then on the way, we're like, oh, you know what? Actually, there's this new barbecue place I wanted to check out. We can change the destination. The important thing is that whoever's driving knows where the heck we're going and can make those little adjustments, along the way. So, maybe you can talk about just, the importance of having, a willingness for the goal or for the destination to sort of adjust and evolve, as we do as artists and as human beings.
Yeah. There's so many, goals with art is such a different one because, you have career goals, right? I want to be in a gallery. I want to be in galleries. I would like to show in a museum. I would like my work to be in museums. I would like to sell art. I'd like to sell more than one piece of art, right? There's all these different things, but then also as the artist, you better have some pretty darn strong goals in the studio. I want my work to get to this point. I want to get here. I want to work large scale. I want to work smaller scale, right? You have to have these goals with your work side by side with these goals for where you want your work to go in the end, right? I love Anthony Tapas, right? I love the Spanish informalist. I love that movement of work. I have a lot of resemblance in my work from those because I'm inspired by them and they inspire me. I want to do things with cement and with stucco and with cardboard the way Anthony Tapas does it. I have goals for my work to take traits of those pieces and those styles I love within my work, right? So I better be practicing and working on those regularly to get those in, all the while pressing forward career-wise, right? Now I'm going to get really vulnerable here because part of what we really want to do with this podcast is be vulnerable, right? As working artists. I have big goals. I have galleries. I have dealers. I have 60 plus paintings out and sculptures in the world, right? Currently in places, right? They're currently between California, Houston, and a few other places. And it's out. I don't know what's going to happen with that, right? Is it going to sell? Is it not going to sell? It's probably going to sell less than more. Maybe if I'm lucky, it sells more than less, but I don't know, And so when we get to that part that you just talked about in Langston's quote from Thank You, Ma'am, if you really want to go, right? Do you have the guts and the wherewithal to really battle in your studio and with yourself? Because I haven't sold a piece in a while. All that works out. Now it's real easy for me to sit in the corner of my studio and go, something's wrong, right? Doesn't mean something's wrong, right? It doesn't. Maybe it does. You got to listen to the negative and the positive. You have to take it all in and talk about, why is it not selling? Is it not? What's the deal? Oh, well, new year. You have all these things, but it's real easy to sit there and go, this is too hard. This is so difficult right now, and really, get depressed over it. Honestly, like we're artists. We deal with those emotions. It's like, man, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm not there yet. Well, instead, let's discover that there are ways of getting where I want to go through that, right? Let's battle through, let's press through, let's keep going and go, how do I get past this? How do I battle these? I'm just going to keep creating work, keep pushing.
Well, and that's one of the things you just reminded me of. That's one of the things that's so inspiring about this quote is that there's always going to be things that we can point to, external variables outside our control, and say, oh, that's why. Or that's probably why A, B, C, or D isn't happening, but when you think about, who said this and when it was said and all of the tremendous obstacles that, not knowing everyone's individual situation, everyone's path is different, but, for the most part, most of us aren't dealing with his level of obstacals and things that he had to overcome that were outside of his control. So this is a situation where, not just the quote itself, but, the person who said it and the time that they were living in, it matters a lot, right? Yeah. So, it's not to pretend that, live in a fairy tale, where everything's perfect and that, these very real challenges, the time that we're going through right now, aren't real. Of course they are. But it's kind of back to that whole, I guess interpretation or mindset that I was talking about before. Like, can I control this? Right? Is this is this in the, 4 square feet that I occupy? If yes, awesome. Like, what can be done? Let's figure out a way to solve it. But how much time and energy we put into thinking about, those things and pointing to those things this is why things are or aren't happening. That's time that we would probably be better spent, focusing on the things that we can control, which is, to your point, getting into a consistent practice and continue to make, more new work, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the most important part, right? Making work and constantly creating and developing and experimenting and taking those risks and making a lot of work. But there's a whole other half to the game, right? How do you get your work out there? What is your goal? Is your goal just to make art, period? That's it. Not share it with the world, not get it out there. I mean, if that's your goal, that's great. Like, I'm in art for art's sake. I'm not in it to get rich. I'm not in it to get wealthy. I want to make money. I want to sell paintings. I want people to hang them in their homes. I want galleries to sell them. But at the end of the day, I'm in it for art. I want to make the best art I can make over my lifetime until I'm gone from this planet. And hopefully, because of my dedication to that, I create some really strong work in the process. But I have to also spend time trying to get to the point where I can sell the work and it can be out there and people can buy it and hang it in their homes and put it in art fairs and museums, blah, 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 which means I have to do work on that part, right? I have to research galleries. I have to look at local galleries, Texas galleries, outside of Texas, different states. Where does my work fit? How does it fit? Who's going to like it? Should I submit to this group show? What residency should I apply to, right? There's this whole other side of being an artist outside of just creating the work, right? But at the end of the day, if the work's not there, then all those people and all those places you're going after, they're not going to take a chance on you if your work's not there yet. So it's a very delicate and difficult balance, but both are key and both are very important.
So what about, maybe we can speak to the person or I'll ask you to speak to the person who's, kind of, not sure, where they're trying to go. Maybe they're kicking around a few different, whatever potential paths or things that may be of interest to them. So if somebody came to you and said, I know, all I know for sure is I love making art, but I'm not sure, I love being an artist. I love being engaged in a creative practice, but I really don't know, where I ultimately, want to go. If we try to, sort of, boil this down to a more tangible takeaway, what advice would you give somebody who's just sort of trying to figure out where they may even want to be shooting for, or what a reasonable goal might be?
Yeah, this is a regular conversation I have with artists that I've mentored from all different levels of art, from beginning, emerging, mid-career. And this is a question that a lot of artists ask, especially in the beginning, right? And I always tell artists, there's no wrong answer. Right? You choose what you want to do. It's your choice. You don't have to listen to anybody else, right? It's your choice to decide how you want to navigate the art world and where you fit in it, right? Just because we love to paint doesn't mean we're not supposed to be an art critic or an art blogger or an art writer. We can still create, but maybe our fit in the art world is to write about art. Maybe our fit in the art world is, beyond creating. But this is the best time in the history of the world probably to be an artist, because you have so many options today that didn't exist 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? So if an artist doesn't want to go the gallery route, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give up commission. I don't want to, invest in somebody else trying to sell my work for me. You can build a website and sell your own work from your website, right? You can use a platform like Saatchi Art to sell your work. You can use Instagram to just sell your work on Instagram, period, right? It's all in your own hands. Your decision is yours, and there's no wrong answer. There's no right or wrong, right? That's the wrong, your choice is wrong. Well, if that's what you feel like doing, then do it. If your goal is to be in the gallery world, then there are ways to go that route, right? If you want to sell from your website, well, you got to get good at doing those things. You got to learn how to sell. You got to learn how to build your website and do shopping cart stuff and all those tedious things that most artists don't want to do. But you have options today that didn't exist. You could start your own virtual gallery and show other artists, right? And build something that's just a community of artists where you have a virtual gallery where you're showing artwork of other artists that you've met on Instagram around the world, right? Now you're helping other artists. You're becoming a curator. Right? Plenty of curators on Instagram, from the Alexander Jackarts to the, Abstract Dukes to, Minute 16, all these great, curators who have brilliant eyes and they're just curating art, probably because they love it. They may have been artists at one point in their life, or they love to paint or create, but they realize I have a lot more strength in this arena than in this one. So there's no wrong place. It's just figuring out where you're most comfortable and where you really want to go.
Well, you brought up something that's really important that I think is definitely worth discussing, which is, as I've heard you could refer to it as the shit work, right? All of the things that need to be done to really accomplish, whatever you might be trying to do. And it's funny. I've shared this story with a number of people over the years, but I think I was probably in college, and we were spending the weekend at a buddy's house, or buddy's lake place, right? And his dad had been very successful and had run and sold numerous businesses. Real nice lake place. Anyway, we're sitting down to dinner one night, and we're just kind of talking to Bob and picking his brain and whatever, just asking questions, really indirect questions, but basically like, hey, how do we maybe have a place like this someday? One of the things that he said, that always stuck with me was one of his first businesses, was in, garbage disposal. He said, I saw an opportunity, to buy a garbage company, a trash disposal company. And everybody thought I was crazy. The people that knew me the best said, what are you doing? Why do you want to be hauling garbage? And I'll never forget this. He said, I didn't want to be hauling garbage. I didn't want to be involved in the garbage business, but I realized that that was something that made complete sense for me to do to get to where I ultimately wanted to go. Yep. And I think about that just in a much more, in much more simple terms, but all the things, so share, a bit about my story. When I left the business world, I was like, oh, sweet. Don't have to worry about, emails or schedules or, having to, and it's like, dude, like, wake up, like, these are realities of pretty much anything that you might, want to do. So there's always the point is there's always going to be an element or pieces of what we want to do that we're not going to love. It doesn't mean that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. It just means that, there are things that we may not love every single aspect of, fill in the blank with your dream career, and somebody who's walking that walk today is waking up being like, damn it, I got to do, I want to be a professional athlete. Okay, cool. That person's got to wake up, sore, hardly able to, limp their way to the bathroom in the morning, and they got to get ready to go perform every day, blah, blah, whatever. Fill in the blank. But there's always going to be something that you don't love doing. So it's important to embrace the necessity of doing those things, understanding that they serve, the bigger goal, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, you gotta work at it. I mean, let's see, last week, I was down with COVID. So I wasn't really in the studio, but I spent all my time going through residencies and applying to artist residencies, right? I don't want to sit in front of a computer and, I'm a dork. So I learned ways for me to be organized in a way that is probably different than most people. So I've got spreadsheet after spreadsheet of dream galleries I fit in, galleries I want to be in someday on spreadsheets, right? And I keep track of all these things. And, I was going through them yesterday. I was spending time literally just going through my spreadsheet because, man, there's a lot of those galleries that unfortunately closed their doors during the pandemic. It was heartbreaking. And so, but I'm on spreadsheets, I'm researching residencies and where do I fit? Is this a good residency to apply for? Looking at all the things they require, all the things that, come with that residency, researching it, looking at the curators, looking at the jurors for group shows, researching people. Oh, I, heard about these new curators in Fort Worth or in Dallas. Who are they? Where are they from? What kind of art do they like? So I spend that time doing that shit work, and then making notes and keeping track. Because, man, it's so easy for me to forget. I spend so much time painting in my studio. I'm so focused on the work that if I don't write it down and keep a spreadsheet of it, I'm going to forget everything I saw earlier that morning when I get in studio mode and I'm working. So, it's that two sides I talked about earlier, right? You want to spend as much as your time making, but you got to spend time researching and trying to find out where you fit if that's your goal. But I tell my artists all the time that I mentor, experiment with things, figure it out. Where's your fit? What are ways you could bring in a little money on the side to pay for new materials? Can you just sell $50 paper pieces and studies on Instagram? You sell 10 of those, $50. That's a good little check to, go buy some paint, get some canvas and some supplies. So experiment the hell out of it.
What advice would you give somebody who's all right? So they've got a goal. They know where they ultimately want to be. They acknowledge that it's a few steps down the road. I think it's important to begin with the end in mind, right? To have at least an idea that's current of what the destination is and what we're trying to accomplish, but also then being able to reverse engineer back to, okay, what are the checkpoints along the way? For somebody who maybe doesn't have a mentor or doesn't have access to someone who, knows a little bit more than they do, gosh, how do I figure this out? Like, how do I make something more tangible, more short term, to know that I'm, on the way? And that's not an easy question.
Yeah. There's a lot in there. I had no idea how to get to where I wanted to go, right? When I left to paint full time and to be a full-time studio artist, I knew what my goals were. I want to be in galleries. I want to take that another step someday and hopefully hang in museums. Lofty goals, right? No small goals, right? This is a very rare percentage of artists that actually get to live that life. But those are my goals, and that's where I'm at. No idea how to get there. So I just read, man. I studied. I researched my butt off. I have read so many artist journals and, artist writings and books constantly. And I found that my confidence grew because I read all the art books, right? How to do it, what to do, all those things. But then I got more into the philosophical side of art. So I started reading those books. And then I found by reading artist journals, that just gave me so much confidence to read stories and read from the artist's words, their struggles, that they had no idea how to do it either. Whether it's 1920, 1940, 1960, that they had no idea how to do it either. And so I kept hearing their voices, male and female, saying the same words I'm saying today, or I said 4 years ago, that I may say in 2 years. But it was just this echo. It was an echo chamber, right? Which to me was a confidence builder. Picasso said it. Joan Miro said it. Frankenthaler said it. Joan Mitchell said it. And, George O'Keeffe said it. I keep hearing these artists that I love saying things that I was saying right now, right? It just gave me that confidence to go, listen, these are the artists in museums. They're the ones we know. And for me to hear them say, to know what I have put in front of me for my own goals was just a confidence builder. Like at the end of the day, we need to be building confidence in ourselves. And I found for me, that's been the best practice to build that confidence as I went out and tried to hit these milestones or try to, figure ways to get my work out into the world I want to be in.
Yeah, it's funny how much encouragement can be gained from just realizing that all the greats are just people too.
Yeah,
that they had the same, doubts and fears and insecurities and challenges along the way. And unless you do that research, unless you do that reading and really dig in, all you're doing is all you're able to do really is just look at the finished work, the best of the best, the credits and all of the accomplishments, and say, oh, that just must have been that way for them, the entire time, which of course is not true. I'm curious for you, it sounds as though your overall objective, has not changed since you decided to, go full time. But what, I'm curious, could you give an example or two of how sort of the path, may have, changed, how there have been some twists and turns along the way that you just, could not have known, were coming, but just ended up being a part of the overall story.
Yeah. I was always painting and creating, since I left college, which was 1999. And so I was always painting and creating, always. But didn't know how hard it was going to be to actually become a stronger artist and get my work out into the world. And so when I was always doing little shows, here and there, group shows in Dallas, Denton area, Austin, Fort Worth, and I was doing a lot of my own shows. So friends of mine, we'd go empty out a barn in Denton, Texas, and sweep it out and hang work and invite everybody out and have, 200, 300, 400 people show up for an art show. And it was just one night openings, but I'd find apartment complexes that had a hallway and show my work there, coffee shops. Like, I was always trying to build the resume, right? That's the key. Show work anywhere. Doesn't matter. My house, I would, empty the house and do a show in the house. I'd do it in the garage when we had a house, like always trying to fill the resume with shows. Right. And then that, took a turn. People would start to notice. And so, would get in a group show in a gallery in Dallas or in Fort Worth or Houston or other places, the Texas biannuals type things like that, where it's New Texas Artist Series, like, weaving my way in. And then honestly, Instagram was the big jump. When Instagram started to explode is when I started to really share my process and share my work. And, as Austin Kleon says, I was a documentarian of what I did. When I read his book, Show Your Work, I went, oh, now I need to start showing how I do it and what I do and see if I can get any traction. I started to be really vulnerable about my struggles and talking about it. And not just my struggles with work, but my struggles with being a working artist. And that vulnerability, I think, led to people starting to take notice at a time when art really exploded on Instagram. And so then I had some galleries and dealers start reaching out here and there. And there were some that were failures that, wonderful people that I did stuff with, but then nothing flew, nothing really happened. But CV, notch on the CV, right? I can add a line on that resume, which is important. Did a residency in Budapest, got accepted to certain residencies I turned down. And so it was kind of all over the place, but just kind of trying everything I could. And I learned I made mistakes along the way because gallery owners would say, hey, you should never do X. And I'd go, shoot, I had no idea. And they go, well, sorry. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we can't work with you now because you had prices on your website. We were interested. Now we're not. So it's like, you learn these little things that are, not accepted or are accepted. And you just have to kind of go with the flow and change as you go and as you learn. If that answers the question.
It does, yeah. And I think, maybe to bring things full circle, there's something else that jumped out about the quote, and you just referenced it, as well. But, the quote begins with, I'll read the whole thing again, but I have discovered in life that there are ways of getting almost anywhere you want to go if you really want to go.
Yep.
And, I think that discovered word is really important as well. If you think about and just break down like what it means to discover something, it's not being handed, a playbook. It's not being told, hey, oh, you want to go there? Just, take a right, take a couple lefts, go for, it'll be on the right,
Yep.
There's a discovery process, and the only way to do something, especially on a path like this one where it's not a straight line, is to be engaged in the process of discovering. And a lot of it comes down to faith, right? And trust that, all right, this is going to take me, to your point, if it doesn't take me in the exact direction I'm trying to go, it'll at least, Thomas Edison, crossed off, 10,000 ways that, to not make a light bulb, right? So I think just embracing, the discovery of all of it, is probably a good, thing to keep in mind, understanding that, discovery doesn't just happen where you walk right to the X marked on the spot and find the treasure. You got to dig, get a look. You got to, dig a lot of empty holes before you, hit pay dirt, right?
Yeah. I mean, and live for discovery, people. Live for discovery. The more time you put in, you're going to discover things, right? Look for that nourishment. Look for those miracles within your work. As you're creating and spending time, like, man, live for discovery. Like if you're just going through the motions every day and you're not trying to really discover things in your work itself, why are you doing it? Why are you creating? Like, live for that discovery. I mean, I find it all the time. I go, oh, why have I never thought of that? Or, oh my gosh, that's how they did it, right? I'm always trying to find those moments where it's like this, boom, as Basquiat would say, boom, Duckman, it's just like, there it is. That's it. Wow, that's beautiful. How did I do that? And then take it to the next step. Like, I think that's why Picasso is such a genius in his work. He was always on the search for discovery. You know what I mean? He knew he couldn't get to something new if he wasn't constantly trying to discover. And what happened? He continually created new idea, right? He knew that the vision was so far ahead of him. If he wasn't sprinting towards it hard, he may not get there instead of walking towards it, right? He's like head down working. So live for discovery.
Well, and that's probably a good place to end too, because I think that, as important and critical as it is to have a destination in mind, let's not forget about the journey.
Yeah.
Realize that the journey is required. And if we don't find a way to embrace and enjoy the process, then best case, we're only going to be fulfilled, and happy at the very end of the finish line, which that's not a life that I'd be too excited about. So the journey matters.
Yeah. The journey matters. And, for everybody out there that listened today, go buy a Langston Hughes book, this week when you're done. Buy any one of his poetry books, buy The Weary Blues, go study up on Langston Hughes and just learn about, especially if you're an American citizen. I don't care where you are, go buy Langston Hughes books, but especially if you're an American, man, you need to go learn about somebody that is a backbone of American poetry and fiction, and literature, who withstood more odds than, most of us, can even imagine at a time. And take it even a step further and go research the Harlem Renaissance as well. I think you're going to be blown away by the impact that the Harlem Renaissance had on the art world and its future in America, especially in New York, which, we all know is the mecca of the art world. So do yourself a favor and do a little research this week.
I love that. Anything else before we close?
Nope. Find Nathan and I on Instagram. We'd love to hang out and talk to you. So if not, then we'll see your faces or see your texts or your voices another time. But tune in. We'll see you on the next episode.
Over now. Have a great one.